can't step over the line until the event person says that basically you're cheating. You can't start until they say. So I said, whoa, okay, sorry. He said, don't worry about it. That's really impressive that you were even wanting to do that. Like, he said that to me. So that wasn't even a 1 second intro. That was like a half second. He was yelling at me and it was still awesome, right? So the 7-second intro is in 7 seconds. If you can't come in and be energetic and look them in the eyes and be excited, then you're losing an opportunity to be great at it. You're losing an opportunity to make that great first impression. The next thing is probably the most valuable part of this workshop when it comes to things that I see a lot of students be challenged with. And that is the second I, which is invert. I want you all next to invert to draw an upside down triangle. Draw an upside down triangle. What this means is that a lot of times the number one thing that students are lacking when they're doing a role play is they lack structure. They come in and they just start talking, like kind of like what I did in the bad role play, right? Like I just came in and started talking about what my plans were. What a structure does is first of all, it makes your presentation make some sense. And second of all, it helps you because you know exactly what you're going to be talking about in what order. So here's what that upside down triangle means. To invert means to turn something upside down. Invert means you're going to order your performance indicators that you're given. You don't have to talk about them in the order they're on the page. You can move them around, you can change the order. Put them in an order that you're going to talk about that starts with the biggest idea first. What was the first performance indicator that I talked about? What was the big word? Profit, right? Is profit a pretty big idea? Yes. It's more or less the reason why capitalism exists, so it's a pretty big idea. So I started out talking about profit. Then I started talking about kind of a narrower concept. I started talking about product mix. And I talked about each concept a little bit at a time. And each concept gets its own special little moment. And I start with the biggest idea and then work into the more narrow ones. Now here's the thing. There's no right answer to how you order them. You're not being judged on this. This isn't something the judges are looking for. It's supposed to help you. The idea of this is put them in an order that you want to talk about in a way where you're starting with the big idea and then working your way down. Don't feel obligated. Don't feel obligated to talk about them in the order on the page. Here's the other part. This is my new acronym that is the second most important thing that if you take away something from this presentation, I want you to take away. And it's how do you talk about a performance indicator? How do you talk about it? What do you say when you're actually talking about each performance indicator? And here's what it is. It's an acronym that's very challenging to remember. It's DECA. It's hard. So the acronym is DECA. Here's what they are. Define it. Define what that performance indicator means. The first thing I talked about when I talked about profit is what the definition of profit was. And I said, I understand this is a pretty simple idea, but I think it's important to have the big picture. So I defined it. I gave a definition. Go ahead and pull that up a little bit further. The E is you're going to explain / give an example. Explain / give an example. So you're going to define what profit is, and then I gave an example. So I said, for instance, in our company, our product is made up of the revenues, which are all of the things that we sell, and the costs, which are all the things that we use to purchase. So for example, on a can of food, your revenue is the amount you're selling it for, and the cost is the amount it costs to sell that. So I gave an example in the situation. An example. C is connect it back to your solution. I wrote situation, but connect it back to your solution. Because a role play, at its heart, you still have to solve a problem, right? You still have something that you actually have to do. So connect it back to your solution. Connect it back to the problem. Connect it back to what you're talking about. So for me, I connected it back to the canned soups and why the canned soups were awesome, right? I connected it back. This is why I'm talking about it. And then the last thing is above and beyond. This is important. Next to above and beyond, there's Bryson Woodley, who's our executive director. He constantly calls this, and I think it's important to write it down, the wow factor. The wow factor. And what the idea is that when you're competing at the national conference, this is the way this works. You may not know this. This is the way it works. Everybody you're competing against took the same test as you. When you are in the preliminary rounds at nationals, every person happens that every judge that you talk to, or every person that you're competing against, has talked to the same exact judge as you. So I want you to think about that. You're all taking the same test, and at nationals, you're all competing against the same, you're all talking to the same judge. Your goal is to make that judge remember you, to make that judge say, wow. And I want you to consciously be thinking about that when you're preparing for a presentation. What am I doing that's going to make this judge say, wow? Because if you just come in and do the same thing everybody else is doing, you're going to get lost in the mix. But if you are intentionally doing something, being really exciting, coming up with a great idea, coming up with a theme for a promotional plan, doing a blimp, whatever it is, whatever you're going to do in that presentation, you need to come up with a moment that you're going to try to make that judge say, wow, that person deserves to get my highest score. Because if you can get that judge's highest score, you have a higher chance of winning by far. So that's what invert means. Talk about each performance indicator in order, and define, give an example, connect to the situation, and go above and beyond. I love that acronym. So easy to remember. 4 I's and DECA. Great. So the next one is impress. Impress. There are a couple different ways that I think that y'all can go about trying to impress a judge. And here's what they are. There are 3 of them. In my old presentation, I used to call this the BET. The BET. The B is budget. The E is effectiveness. And the T is timeline. These are just a couple of examples of something that you can do to try to impress the judge. If you're coming up with a plan, and you come in, like let's take for example my plan. I said I think we should do some TV ads and I think we should do a blimp. If I'm a high school student and I'm going into a judge and I say we want to do a blimp, what's that judge probably thinking? Yeah, right. Right? Like it just seems kind of like maybe it seems like a silly idea.